Project Maria is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to share accurate information to ensure that those whose lives are affected by eating disorders are more understood and can receive superior care. Project Maria was formed in response to the 2015 death of Alita Dorn, a 17-year-old girl from Rock County, Wisconsin, who struggled with anorexia nervosa. Maria's parents, Michael and Alita Dorn, join us today to discuss some of the difficulties the holidays can bring to those with eating disorders and their caregivers and families.
It can be challenging to understand how difficult the holidays can be for someone with an eating disorder. Most of us have a tremendous amount of anticipation when it comes to a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner. I mean, all that food, we just love it. We can't wait to talk about it and eat it and just go on and on about it. But it's a different story when someone with an eating disorder is going to be present.
Holidays are often food focused, and that can bring up a lot of stress, shame, anxiety, and feel like it's a test for the person with an eating disorder. They can experience such a heightened sense of anxiety that it's like they're being served live snakes on a plate.
One thing that happens a lot during the holidays and during any other time, but especially during the holidays, is where things are so food focused, is that people spend a lot of time talking about their own issues with food. You'll often hear people say like, oh, I'm going to have to diet for a week after this meal, or something like that, because they're eating a big meal at Thanksgiving. That can be very triggering for a person with an eating disorder, because that's hard for them to hear. If you know someone is going to be at a dinner, especially if you know someone is going to be at a dinner who has an eating disorder, it's best just to avoid any comments about the food or anything like that, or about weight or size or clothes or on how they fit. Just go ahead and enjoy the food, enjoy conversation, but focus on something other than the food as your topic of conversation. Steer the conversation to something else happening in the family. What's going on in school? What's going on with people's jobs? What's going on in the football game on TV? Anything like that. Distracting the person with an eating disorder from the food by talking about other things can be very helpful and help them feel accepted and comfortable during this time.
You want to keep the celebration about the reason that you're there to celebrate, not necessarily about the food.
Which is a very un-American thing to do.
Yeah.
Because we want to celebrate the food, and the food is the whole thing. But changing that focus is really important.
Mm-hmm. I think as we try to decrease the emphasis on food and increase the emphasis on the reason that we're gathering, it's important to plan distractions from that food before the meal and after the meal. The person seeking recovery might bring some fidget tool that might help them with their anxiety. They might just cling to their phone and enjoy being on Instagram or texting or something like that to distract them. The person hosting might decide that they want to have some games beforehand, some caroling afterwards, things that are appropriate for the holiday that you're celebrating.
Yeah, I think distractions can be really valuable. Having the opportunity to get out of the house if the weather permits and do something away from the kitchen. I mean, we all know that all good parties end up in the kitchen. I mean, that's been said many times. But move the party out of the kitchen. Have other areas in the home that maybe aren't so food saturated.
We can, as a person hosting the party, try to prepare the people that are coming to the party, especially if it's a smaller, more intimate gathering like your family. You can send something out about, we want to avoid these conversations, instead do this or that.
It's very tempting for someone who's maybe an extended family member or someone who is not a part of that immediate caregiving team to say something simple like, come on, if you just eat a little bit more, it's just a little food, go ahead. That can happen. And it happens innocently, and we aren't going to, cast aspersions at the person for making a mistake. So preparing for when those mistakes happen is really important. That's part of the process. If there's going to be a struggle trying to figure out, gosh, how are we going to get the conversation away from food? How are we going to get the conversation to a different topic? There are plenty of opportunities out there for conversation cards. If you look online, there's hundreds of places that you can just get little cards. You can put one at each place setting, and it's a little topic of conversation that people are going to have during the dinner. It makes it kind of fun. You never know. What's the best movie you've seen in the last 6 months? What's your favorite? What's a book that you've seen? Just all these little conversation starters. That can take the pressure off everybody, because I'm sure everyone's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable saying, okay, I do want to talk about this, but I don't want to talk about that. It can get into everybody's head a little bit.
If some of these no words or phrases come up, like diet, calories, etc., before the event, the person with an eating disorder can have a discussion with their family or their caregivers and or with their treatment providers how they might choose to respond to those conversations. They can choose to respond to some of that talk. They can choose to ignore it. They can choose to distract themselves from it or walk away. All those choices are fine. So it's good to have a conversation before the activity or before the event to discuss how they might respond if some of those phrases or words come up at the dinner plate.
Again, people are going to make mistakes, and we just have to let that happen and then move on from it, process it and move on.
If you're hosting, say, everybody can arrive at such and such time. There'll be appetizers at 1 o'clock. We'll be serving the meal, because having structured time is less stressful for the person with the eating disorder. Unstructured time increases their stress quite a bit. So if you're the person hosting, you can send out a menu of what's expected. At our family gatherings, we're often throwing out, I'm bringing this, who's bringing that, and we've got a list, at least, probably within a week beforehand, of what's going to be served. That way the person with the eating disorder, along with their caregivers or their treatment team, can have some type of plan for what they might try to eat at that meal and what kind of portion sizes might be expected. One thing that you can do is, if you are the person that's supporting someone with an eating disorder, be honest with the feelings that you have about the dinner or the holiday coming up. With trying to support someone with an eating disorder, we can experience a lot of anxiety, and it's important to share that, what you're feeling and the concerns that you have, with the family around you, and that serves as a good role model for being transparent. So hopefully that other people will share their concerns.
One thing that's important also when working with someone with an eating disorder or having somebody with an eating disorder at a meal is give them permission to check out sometimes. Let that person have an opportunity, if they are feeling uncomfortable, to go someplace that's away from the food and away from the focus on food. Create a safe place within the house that's going to be kind of food-free for a little while, just to let them decompress and get away from all that pressure, because there is a lot of food associated with the holidays.
For the person who's in recovery, it can be helpful to have a buddy at the holiday meal. The buddy might be a cousin that's there. A buddy might be a sibling. The buddy might be a friend that you got permission to bring to the holiday party. With that buddy, you might have discussed the challenges that you are expecting, the strategies you're thinking about using. You may discuss that you're going to kick that person under the table, give them a squeeze of their hand or something like that if you need some extra help, or you might find a key word that is kind of a hint that you're struggling a little bit. Then that buddy will have known how they can serve you, whether they can say, hey, let's go, I've got something to show you on my phone or whatever, and find some reason to get away from the meal. Perhaps it's just to go to the other room and talk a little bit. Perhaps that's a good excuse to go out and take a short walk, some type of break if the person in recovery is struggling. So that buddy system can be very good. It can come from a friend, it can come from the family, but it shouldn't come from someone who's trying to host the event or is a main cook, because they're too stressed or too spread too thin to probably be available enough for the person in recovery. So you can come prepared with some high-calorie snacks. So if things are delayed half an hour, 2 hours, you have some high-calorie snacks that you can try to stay on schedule with your meal plan. What is going to be served can be very stressful too.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of knowing what's going to be served produces a significant amount of anxiety. Another thing that can be easier for the person with an eating disorder is, instead of having to go through and pick their own food, is having it plated for them. Can you explain that?
Sure. Plating food is just what it sounds like. Instead of choosing your own food, somebody who's a caregiver or someone who's knowledgeable will actually go and create a plate of food for the individual who's struggling with food, and they eat that food then off that plate without having to make the choices themselves. Taking away the pressure of having to make the choice of which foods to put on the plate and how much of each food to put on the plate can be a huge relief for an individual who's really struggling at a difficult time.
The holidays have plenty of responsibilities already, and it's good to say no to a lot of those because you have enough on your plate yourself. I think if you are the person that is struggling with an eating disorder, give yourself a break. You have, don't give in to negative thoughts. Instead, if those thoughts come through your mind, you can't stop them. Acknowledge them, but then challenge them, and don't let them rule you. You shouldn't have any shame associated with your struggles. Have pride in the positive challenges that you've already taken, and just give yourself a lot of love, because this is a difficult holiday for you, and it's important that you take care of yourself with lots of TLC.
This is going to be a huge hurdle, and finding some self-acceptance in that and understanding that this is going to be a difficult time and giving yourself permission, both as the individual with an eating disorder or as a caregiver for someone, giving permission for a little bit of failure during this time. Give yourself permission to struggle, and then take time to process that struggle.
It's important to get your resources ready, get your support system ready. So whether you're a caregiver or the person that is in recovery, make extra appointments for meeting with your counselor, with your dietitian. Be able to take time in those appointments to talk about the challenges that might happen, the strategies that might be used. In your recovery, you've perhaps created a coping list. Create your top 10 of the best ones that are going to work in this situation, so that come that holiday, you've got some things ready, and so you can accept the challenges with a little bit more ease than you would if you were not prepared. If you're the person that is seeking recovery, take on only what you think you can handle. You don't have to go to every holiday party. So stay away from the ones that you think are going to be more triggering, and pick the ones that you think you'll be more comfortable at. That's okay. We all have limits. We all have boundaries, and knowing your boundaries is great wisdom to have.
Everybody in the room is deserving of the benefit of the doubt during this time. If someone makes a mistake, we don't need to make a big deal out of the mistake. If someone struggles with something, we don't need to make a big deal out of it. We just move on. We find ways of adapting and moving on. I think it's also important to remember that the holiday isn't a test for a person with an eating disorder. It's an opportunity. This is a chance to see how things are going. And there's no passing or failing here. There's just a check on progress. How are we doing? Things are going to be very different depending on where an individual is in their recovery process. Someone early on in their recovery process, this is going to be a much more challenging thing than someone who's later in their recovery process. Be adaptable. Everybody in this situation just needs to be sensitive and adaptable to what's going on. And recognizing that maybe this is how we handled it last year when someone was in recovery is going to be different than how it gets handled this year, because they're at a different point in their recovery. They might be further along. They may have relapsed a little bit. We all know that with eating disorders, relapse is a very common problem. So just because someone maybe did well last year during a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner, maybe this year they're at a different place and they're struggling, and it's okay. If there's one theme that that I'd want to bring up through this whole process is don't expect this to be a perfect day, especially in the recovery process. Expect this to be a challenging day, but go at it not as a test, but as an opportunity to see where things are at and an opportunity to learn more about yourself as a caregiver, as a person with an eating disorder, or as an extended family member, so that growth can come from this opportunity.
And whether you came through the holiday and felt at ease or had to take little brief times away from the gathering or had to leave it early, that's all okay. Take it back to your treatment team, process what was challenging, process the strategies that you used, and that'll just prepare you for the next opportunity ahead to be stronger in your recovery. I think the most important thing to remember is to laugh at others, laugh at yourself, and just don't take things too seriously. We all make mistakes in life, and it's important to accept our imperfections and know that we're stronger through the challenges that we go through.
Focus on the reason that you're there. The reason isn't the food, the reason is the people.